Hello, Arisa. How are you today?
Good. How are you, Shirley?
Good. I'm so happy you can join me today, and just it's been fun for me to have those conversations with different friends, and I'm so glad you can be one of my special friends today. And can you tell us a little bit about yourself? Because to me, what's the most fascinating about you is your journey.
Thank
Is
you.
is a path that you have been on, and how you have been navigating, and where you are now, and even where you'll be going next.
Okay.
And yeah, so I think people would really enjoy hearing about you and your starting, your middle, and we're still in the middle. So that'll be great.
Well, thank you for having me. This is such a fabulous idea, and I'm enjoying it and looking forward to hearing many of the interviews you have in the future too.
Mhm.
So yes, I was born in North Carolina. My parents are from Japan, and I was the firstborn Kasumi in the United States.
Mhm.
So my name means born in America. That was the
So
concept
fascinating. Wow.
gave me. And so, yes, I grew up, was born in rural North Carolina, grew up in Raleigh, North Carolina area with the Research Triangle Park. And my parents, my whole family are a family of scientists. So my father is a psychiatrist, or he was a psychiatrist and acupuncturist. My brother is a genetics professor.
Of course. Of course. Right.
You know about this kind of thing.
Right.
Everybody's a scientist.
Yes.
So, I think my father's dream was for me to continue his practice, and unfortunately, I was destined for other things.
That's right. But I think as voice teachers, we do practice psychology.
Very much so.
Right?
Actually, I find that a lot of I do feel that I inherited some of the kind of sense about people from my father, and I do definitely use that in my teaching.
And I think we really have to, for better or for worse,
Yeah.
because I think singing is so connected to your whole person.
Mhm,
It's, I think, from the learning perspective, it is the most intuitive. Therefore, it could also be the most hindered
mhm,
instrument.
mhm. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yes, I grew up trying to aim toward the science career as my parents wanted, but I got sidetracked along the way, and I really felt that I needed to sing all the time. Like I was taking piano lessons and singing before and after them, and then when they had an audition at my school for West Side Story when I was 13, I just felt compelled from some strange source that I had to go and
I love
and I
that.
yeah, and I made a deal with my parents that they would let me audition if I got the lead role, and they thought they'd be safe because I'd never sung a note in my life, and I ended up getting the lead role. So I am very appreciative because it's people like this director that I had for this play that helped me get started, and along the way they're all the helpers along the way that have
Right?
made career possible. So this particular teacher found me a voice teacher,
Mm.
and he even came to my doorbell and rang the doorbell and asked my parents, please let this girl take voice lessons
Wow.
because I really think she needs to take them, and she's destined for something like that. So I'm
I
very
love
grateful to
that.
him. Yeah, very grateful
Wow.
to him. I had wonderful teachers along the way. And so I grew up, I went to a fabulous high school, which was actually the North Carolina School of Science and Math.
Of course. You qualify for it. Your parents say you should go, right?
I mean, I went to a regular high school first, which was great because I met this wonderful music teacher there who
Mhm.
inspired me greatly. But then I decided, one last ditch effort to go with the science and math. I was really happy about it though because it helped me. It was a boarding school, so it helped me get away from my parents. I needed that freedom, I think, to go and explore myself without having the pressures from them. So that was really good. And it was there that I finally decided I really wanted to pursue music. Um, And at that point, after doing competitions, I did NATS competitions and state competitions. And because I kept winning them, my parents finally said, hey,
Well,
they,
there's
"Yeah."
something here.
They said, maybe you really should pursue this because this seems to be your talent. And I don't want you to be sidetracked with other things, trying to make everybody happy. So they finally consented to letting me study music. So I went on to Eastman School of Music in Rochester, New York.
Right.
And yeah, that was a fabulous experience. I
I
met
bet.
amazing teachers
Wow.
there. Yeah.
Yeah, I can totally relate. My first major in college was actually architecture.
Wow.
And because my dad was an architect back in Taiwan, and we were immigrants over here in high school, and a lot of what I felt I wanted to be didn't feel like options. Over in Asia, your fate, your destiny for the rest of your life is decided by the time you're 13, practically, because of the school system. And so moving to the States when I was 15 made a very life altering, because in my perception, which looking back is full of limitations and not even real limitations, I didn't really feel I had options. And so, so I started with architecture, and the class I wanted to take was all filled up because I was too late. So I thought I'll take an easy class, group singing class. Well, that was it. And then I auditioned and transferred. I got accepted by USC in California, and so I told my parents. They said, "Well, it is a really good school. It doesn't matter if your degree's in music; it's a good school." That's how I got around it. So I think we all kind of have that kind of story. Most of the Asian parents, especially I think our generation, I think they're a little bit more relaxed for the next generation, and I think they feel a little safer, more secure. And but I think our parents and their generation still have the remnants of the wars from their parents. And I think they want their children to be secure, to be taken care of, and they want us to take on professions that would make sure we're going to be taken care of. And singing, music, what is that?
I know. And I can see now, being a lot older, that I can see their perspective now, especially having children myself. It
Right.
is a very difficult profession, and I don't think I
Very.
had any idea of how difficult it was until I went through it. So yeah, that's why I think it's definitely something that you have to pursue because you have a calling for it.
That's right.
Because otherwise, it's just so difficult that it's easy to give up. You know?
It's too hard to do it unless you just cannot do anything else. Not in the sense of ability, but there's something in your soul that just says, I have to do it. Because this is a
Yes.
difficult path. This is a very difficult path. If you're just doing it because you like it,
Yes.
it's too hard.
Really a very different ball game than
Mhm.
just having fun playing around in your house.
Very.
So at Eastman, I met amazing people. I studied with Carol Weber. I met some of the best coaches I've ever met in my life. I had a really good education there, which was important since I didn't have much music education before that, having not been encouraged to pursue music.
Right. Right.
So yeah, that was a great experience for me. I went on after that, and I guess the thing about my career is it's been a very non-conventional career.
I love
Um,
that.
yeah, I haven't done things by the book, and I guess if you know me pretty well, I'm not really a by the book type of person anyway.
I love that.
So so I finished, and most people go to graduate school after, and I just couldn't really find a place I wanted to go. So I ended up going to Europe. I went to Germany for a year. My brother said, "Hey, why don't you just go? If you can't find a grad school, go learn to speak German fluently." And at the time, I was really passionate about German lieder, and I
Yes.
had discovered art song for the first time in my life. Up till then, I had thought, why do people like art songs so much? And then I had these amazing coaches at Eastman, like Craig Rutenberg and Armin Guzalimian.
Oh,
And
he's great.
they
Armin
and
is amazing.
he went to
Yeah.
US. He taught at USC.
Yes.
But yeah, they were just so incredible that they inspired me to actually make that into a career. Um, if you really look at my career, I did sing opera for sure, and that's the more, kind of glamorous, glorified part of the career. But in truth, I think I'm at the core a leader, an art song singer, a recitalist is what I am.
I
Um,
relate to you on that. It's so beautiful. Let's take a short break and
yeah,
then we're going to talk more about that.
okay.
So now we're back and we want to talk about German lieder and maybe other art songs and recitals because it's my first love. I just absolutely adore. I love German literature and I just love it when somebody else loves it too. So if you could share, I would just love that.
Yeah. So, we were talking about how I ended up going to Germany
Hmm.
right after undergrad. And so, I one of the things that I learned about German lieder is just how important the poetry is. And as an American, it's really hard to get a sense of what that poetry truly means unless you really understand the language. So it was one of my goals by going over to Germany to understand the culture and the environment in which the composers wrote their songs and to understand the persona of, the people. And so I definitely felt like I got a very good education in that. I went over and I started studying at the Goethe-Institut
Oh,
in
yes.
Berlin.
Hmm.
And I stayed with a homestay family who spoke no English. And so I had to speak German 100% of the time. It was very difficult.
I can
But
imagine. Oh my goodness.
no matter what, like I actually ended up getting whooping cough while I was in Germany. And I had to explain and find out how to say, whooping cough and explain this to my doctor in German and things like that. So, the best way to learn a language is to be around people who don't speak your language and to have to go through life difficulties and explain this in that foreign language. So I got the crash course. So that was really important. I studied at the time with a woman named Riri Gris. She's a famous opera singer in Europe. She's actually American. And she was the one who kind of led me to audition for Kammeroper Schloss Rheinsberg, which was like a big opera festival over there. So that's actually how I made my debut in singing. And so first, in the beginning part of my career, just by chance, I ended up doing a lot of opera because I just sort of got thrown into that world and I loved it. It was fantastic. It was really great experience to learn how to get comfortable on stage. I was 23 years old, and so I tell people, I was still figuring out how to breathe at that point,
Hmm.
and
Right?
the best lesson of how to learn how to breathe is by being put on stage, having to act and do cartwheels and play Hansel and Gretel and have an orchestra playing, with you. And you've got to be able to learn how to breathe and project through that.
Right. Right. Oh my
So,
goodness.
yes, I got the crash course that way, which was really difficult because I had not really had any opera experience before that time. But I really did love the stage. And and then along the way, as I was, doing my opera craft, I was honing my leader skills. I was learning the language. I was learning the nuances of the language. I got to live in Chemnitz, which is part of Sachsen. And Sachsen, even though people make fun of it these days, is sort of the arts capital of Germany from, the golden age. And Sachsen is where Robert Schumann was born.
Hmm.
Wagner lived in Sachsen, Mendelssohn,
Wow.
all the greats, they lived in Sachsen, in Leipzig, and, around that area. So my city that I was living in was about an hour from Leipzig. And so, a lot of times they talk, like, I love Schumann songs, and Brahms, of course, but they
Yes.
talk a lot about the woods and
Hmm.
nature. And Lieder is so much about nature. And I felt so fortunate that I got to go on hikes and walks through the forests in Germany, exactly in the places that those people were walking. and I really to this day really feel like I can understand what they were seeing because I got to see it with my own eyes.
How beautiful.
Yeah.
Wow.
So
That is gorgeous.
every time I talk about, Waldesgespräch, or, something about the forest, or, that landscape, I see this landscape in my head that where I lived. So that was really wonderful. And I actually got to visit like Schumann's house before it even opened as a museum. They
Wow.
were renovating it, and it was where he wrote all of his amazing, Frauenliebe und Leben, and all of the
Mm,
wonderful
yes.
songs. Yeah.
I think it must be so incredible as an experience to feel like you got to be on the inside
Hmm.
of both the composers and the poets,
Yeah.
right? And because I think one thing for me about Lieder that is so different from opera, and that's why it touches me so deeply, is opera, while the emotions is inside out, of course, it is a very external performance format, right? It's very grand. We have the visual, we have the staging, we have the costumes, we have the acting, we have the voice, we have the orchestra, we have the language. But for Lieder, it is an extremely internal expression. It is so internal to have the privilege to experience at a very young age the inside of the creators of those literature is just, to me, it's such an incredible, it's so rich. I am so envious of you. I think that's wonderful.
It's really nice that to find out that you love Leader so much too,
Oh,
because
yes.
I do think it's a special type of person. And
Mm,
the people who do sing Leader, we all have a certain kind of personality. We're a
you
little
do.
bit more subdued than the average opera singer. We're a little more
Yes.
internal. Um,
Very.
I very much relate and feel the poetry in my soul. And that's what I love about learning German, was that
Yes.
the very much the language and the art of pronouncing it is part of
Mm,
expression.
right.
Um, I feel very blessed that I got to learn all these little subtleties that I wanted to
Yes.
learn about. But
Right.
this is my passion. And so after I started to do all my opera, then this part two of my life came, which was more the recital, art, song, chamber
Yes.
music side. And I actually ended up winning a prize at the Robert Schumann competition.
Oh, wonderful.
So that kind of helped launch me towards that direction of leader. And then I went on to perform at a lot of festivals, and I met Dalton Baldwin at a couple competitions.
Wonderful.
And
Yeah.
Dalton Baldwin became a big mentor of mine, and he invited me to sing at the Verbier Festival and his festival in Villecroze, France. And so I got to learn from amazing people.
It
These.
makes a huge difference when we have the opportunity to learn from the great. And for me, my big, well, I have two really big influence when it comes to studying leader. In my senior year, when I went to USC, the school provided this, but it seems like I was the only person who did it all the time. We had a coach, and she was our German coach, and she was from Austria. And yeah, so she was Austrian, and she was a singer, and when she was in her younger days. So every Tuesday afternoon, I would take the entire book of Brahms, the entire book of Schumann, and I just take it to her. I would sit down, we'll read through the poetry together in German to find the inflections and the world within those pieces. And she says, "You're the only person who takes advantage of this. Usually I sit here all afternoon and the school pays for it, but nobody shows up. You're the only person who shows up every Tuesday," because I just loved it. It was so beautiful, and I could hear the relationship between the music, the piano part and the vocal part coming together. Even now, one of my piano students is playing Brahms's Intermezzo in B flat.
Oh yeah.
And now the piano needs to create a different sounds and colors. And this is where the singers, we have the advantage because we have a different color than the piano. I had to play Brahms' Lieder for him so he can hear how the melody interweaves with the piano part. And so it's just such a rich and beautiful experience. And having the opportunity to work with Marty Katz and for young students, they really need to fight for the opportunities to work with the greatest because it opens up your world in such a different ways.
Yes.
And
And
mhm.
you're really lucky because you play piano really well too. So you can really appreciate the marriage between the piano and the song in the leader.
And I had the privilege to sitting a lot of accompaniment coaching sessions that Martin Katz had for the pianists, and uh, and it really is a very rich world when we have the opportunity to get a marriage between the two. And I'm so envious of you being able to live there and just experience this and working with such great people. And I want to take a short pause, and then we're gonna come back and talk about what makes the next stage of your life. And we have been sharing about the beautiful world of how you came into this world of music and your experience with leader and your
Yes.
wonderful starting the career. But the next topic is a little bit more personal and a little bit more difficult. I'm going to let you share with us.
Yeah. So there was a point in my career, I had been singing for about 13 years, and I've been singing a lot all over the world. And I started to have problems. Um, and I didn't really realize what it was for a very long time. I had problems with performing, and every time I would start to try to sing or warm up, I felt like somebody was strangling me, and I couldn't really explain it. And I went to many many doctors, um, ENTs, to try to find out what's wrong with me. Why am I feeling this cramping feeling every time I sing? And nobody could figure out what it was. It wasn't on my vocal cords because they looked at that many, many times and there was nothing going on. So there weren't really a lot of explanations. Meanwhile, I was just getting more and more depressed because I couldn't figure out what was wrong with me. I was performing, I was actually reaching the peak of my career. I had a full schedule for the year and I was just having so much difficulty. And in the journey of trying to find out what was wrong, I ended up getting pregnant.
Oh, that's an interesting solution.
Well, actually, somebody told me that I should go off of the birth control pill, and that's how it happened because they thought that would help my voice, but it wasn't that either.
You were lucky because I was on birth control pills for only a year. It took my top and it took me
Oh,
years to get it back.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so it wasn't that, but that was one result was that I ended up with my beautiful son.
I love it. What a solution, right?
But meanwhile, I was on this journey trying to figure out what was wrong with me, and it wasn't until I started Alexander Technique with a
Yes.
woman named Martha Furtman in Princeton, New Jersey,
Mhm.
that I started to understand that this was not a physical issue.
Yeah.
This was a psychosomatic issue of my being anxious and stressed and it manifesting itself in my cramping in my muscles. And if you know much about Alexander Technique, the person who invented it, he actually had very similar issues
Right.
stage, and
Mhm.
that's why he came up with Alexander Technique. Well, that was incredibly helpful, and it did help me to identify what was going on.
Mhm.
I had been singing for 13 years at that point, getting on stage, singing for thousands of people,
Mhm.
and I didn't realize that I had anxiety because I thought everybody went through that much misery when they went on stage.
Right?
I I love performing and I love being there for people and emoting and giving to people, but
Mhm.
the part leading up to that is excruciating for me. I have such a perfectionistic standard in my head, and it got worse and worse as I got older, and the pressure really builds as you start to make a career. And I think it just became overwhelming for me. The level of the standard I was setting for myself was just unachievable.
Mhm.
And so I think that I just became more and more nervous. Sometimes I would like vomit before I went on stage, I would just, mentally spiral.
Right.
And then eventually, because I wasn't listening to my body shut down and said, I don't want to sing anymore. So even though I started to figure out what was wrong, I just was in a state at that point in my life where I just couldn't deal with it anymore. I had to walk away.
I get it.
So
Mhm.
I quit. I quit
Yes,
singing.
I can
And
understand that. Hmm.
yeah.
Yeah, because
And
I came to Orlando because I started working with a teacher in New York, and she lived in Orlando and taught in New York at the same time. And one of the biggest thing about her program was the approach of dealing with a whole person. And the anxiety was getting to be so bad to me that I just wanted to retreat. I didn't want to sing in front of people anymore.
yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I still deal with this, every day, but I'm going to tell you a little bit about how I got through it.
I love that. Hmm.
So I took a long break because I had my son. I went back to singing for a little while, but I found that it was very difficult to travel internationally
Right.
with the baby in tow. Unless you are a very successful opera singer, famous, making millions of dollars, it's
Mhm.
very difficult to have a child and make a career work because you have to pay for childcare
Right.
and nannies unless you have a mom that can help you out, which I didn't really have anybody that could help me out for free. So
Right.
so I ended up taking a break. I had my daughter. Um, I didn't sing for about 4 or 5 years. I quit cold turkey. I was like, I don't want to have anything to do with singing anymore.
Hmm.
Um, and I felt empty in
Mm.
my soul. I did. I felt empty, but I just kind of decided that's how it's going to be. And then this is where I really believe that again the calling comes back. Where
That's right.
I
Hmm.
felt like I decided to move to Orlando at that point.
Hmm.
And all of a sudden, just one thing after the other started happening where music started to come back into my life. I um I had worked with John Sinclair many years ago, and he found out I was in Orlando and offered me a job at
Wonderful.
Rollins to teach. So I ended up starting to teach.
Hmm.
Then I started to sing, with the Bach Festival, with the Orlando Philharmonic, and I had to learn how to rehabilitate myself to get back on stage because there was no choice anymore. I was like, you can't be having this anymore. You have to figure out how to sing. So I started to do a lot of yoga.
Hmm.
I know that you and I went to the same yoga studio,
Right.
with College Park Yoga.
Right.
Teresa and Calvin are
Oh,
amazing.
wonderful.
Yes, that was amazing for me. It
Yes.
changed my mindset. I started to feel centered on myself instead of worrying about all the external.
Right.
I worked on meditation.
Hmm.
I did certain kinds of poses and stretches and
Right.
breathing and I just did everything I could to start to learn how to zone in on what was important and not feel like I was worrying about what everybody else was thinking.
Right.
So those things were incredibly helpful for me in my journey back to learning how to sing without all of that um, fear and anxiety.
Well, that is so incredible. And I'm also very curious about what happens next. So I would love to talk a little bit about that. What happens next for you once you figure it out? I think once we figure out the issue with anxiety, it doesn't just return us back on stage. It returns us to other parts of ourselves as a full, complete person, as an artist, and the rest. So I like to talk a little bit about that. So we're going to come back and talk about that. So we're back talking about life after anxiety. And I'm so glad you brought your beautiful voice back on stage. But there's more about life. After we finish experiencing that part of life, we're never the same person. So I'd love for you to talk about what has what has happened since.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think the best thing, the blessing of having not had singing in my life for a while, was that it taught me how to live life without music.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I was pretty much obsessed with my career and obsessed with singing for about 20 years. And I didn't really know how to be happy without music and singing. And it forced me to find other aspects of life that were important to me. And I think that's a real strength and a real advantage to feel that way, because then you don't feel so dependent on your music
Right.
world to make you happy. So I think it gave me a lot of courage. I definitely, I still sing some, and I definitely went back to some singing, but my whole life had changed. I had a family, and I needed to, be in one place, and so I had to find ways to fulfill myself without traveling and going everywhere and singing. And honestly, you just reach a season in your life where that doesn't really make you happy anymore. You have to find other ways to find meaning in life. And so what happened was interesting. I was teaching at Rollins for many years, and I started to see a shift in people over the time I was teaching. I taught there for about 6 years, and I saw that less and less people seemed interested in classical music and classical technique, and they really wanted to just shift to, like, the more modern art form. And for me, having spent my whole life on classical music and loving classical music and the whole entire art form, I felt like it was my responsibility to carry this on somehow and not let it die out.
Yes.
And meanwhile, it had been for about 15 years, I had always dreamt of starting my own music series. I had started one very briefly with my friend Thomas Bagwell. We started an
Oh
art,
yeah. Yeah.
yeah, we started an art song group together, and we were doing performances at the Austrian Embassy and the Austrian Cultural Forum. But eventually, like, other things took us in different directions, but it was still my dream. I also worked at Marlborough Music Festival. I experienced the whole beauty of chamber music. um, I had been in Europe and seen all these gorgeous concerts at palaces, and how much people enjoyed being in that ambience of a palace and seeing gorgeous music. And so when my friend decided to purchase Howey Mansion and renovate it, I saw it as a perfect opportunity for us in Florida to have that experience
Very
of
much
being
so.
in a beautiful palace, listening to beautiful music, and also for me to fulfill my dream of, and my responsibility as somebody of this generation, to pass on everything that I learned from the generation previous. So, so I started the Howey Mansion Music Series. I founded it from scratch as a nonprofit, and I'm now the executive and artistic director. And we focus solely on classical and jazz music to try to educate audiences
Right.
and show them what's so amazing about these art forms, so that it doesn't die out and it continues for a long, long time to come. So that's one of my goals, is
I
to
love that.
really reach out
Yeah.
to people. I also teach privately, and that's become very meaningful for me, because everything that I went through, it has purpose and meaning
That's right.
if I can share it with somebody else, and hopefully it benefits them as well. So
Absolutely. And for the past few years, I went through a few years where I was able to do between 20 to 30 recitals because there is a pleasure in singing and performing on my own terms.
yes, absolutely.
And most of those concerts were on a shoestring budget, and I wanted to make it available to anyone. And most of the people are not classical concert goers, and we had to create some very creative programming and creative way of presenting it. And so I really, this what you're talking about is really close to my heart, and I've been keeping the stuff kind of low key, and because I think sometimes it is so different from the mainstream classical music career as performers that it is but how else would you reach out to people? How else are we going to create the next generation of audience? So I love what you're doing, and I'm so grateful you joined me today, and I'm having a really good time. It
I
feels, yeah, it feels like we're meeting with our hearts and not just a meaningless conversation.
Yeah, yeah,
And
it's a wonderful way to get to know you. I've always I've always wanted to get to know you, and I think
likewise,
that we have a lot in common with
we
our
do.
passion for poetry and theater and
Right, right, absolutely. And so I'm just so grateful. And hopefully we can do this again. I have a feeling there's a lot more to be talked about.
I think
And yeah, so we're going to end the conversation here now, but the conversation itself will continue. And I'm so grateful. And thank you so much for your time. And this will be posted on different social media. And I think people will really benefit from what you have to share.
thank you, Shirley. It's been a pleasure, and I'm so happy to get to know you a little better.
Right? And so until next time.
Do it again sometime. Bye,
Yes.
Shirley.
Bye bye.